We all know SnowRunner's track categories are terrible, as I like to regularly mention, but instead of just pointing out the problem, this time I'm actually going to suggest some solutions. Let me quickly explain the problem. The current categories are very vague. Highway, heavy duty, heavy off-road and scout. But I'm pretty sure that almost all the vehicles in the game, at least the ones that aren't just production cars, could accurately be described as heavy duty, and I'm not strong enough to lift any of them, so I think they're all pretty heavy. And it's SnowRunner, so they all end up off-road. Then the application of these categories is a mess. Why is this a heavy, not a heavy duty like the rest of the US semi-trucks? Why is this in the highway class, but not this? Where is the line between heavy and off-road, when the Azov 5 is the heavier of the two? And how is this a scout? Then there is also the issue of the trucks always being sorted by last use in your storage, and combined, this makes finding trucks an absolute pain when you have more than 20 or 30. The most obvious potential solution is to simply fix the application of the current categories. I had a go myself. Here's the lists. If you want to read it, pause the video and have a look. I've tried to make the distribution better. Instead of having 7 highway, 9 heavy duty, 33 heavy, 27 off-road, 27 scout, while also putting trucks in an appropriate category instead of the jumbled mess the devs have given us. While this would be an improvement, I don't think this could actually solve the problem at hand. The categories themselves just don't work, especially after 4 years of DLC vehicles being thrown in there. So what other ways could we categorize them then? Various ideas crossed my mind for new category names, similar to what currently exists, probably keeping Scout, but then having other vague words, but they all have the same problem. So I tried to think of something not too dissimilar to the current system, but without naming the categories seemingly random nouns and adjectives. The first thing that came to mind for this was to return to the spin tyres and mud run approach of classes between A to E, based on size and off-road capability, with A being generally the scout type vehicles and E being the huge 8x8s. Those are the star system, but that's kind of similar and has the same problem, so I'm not going to talk about it. But there were not many vehicles in the previous 2 games, so it was not too important how they were categorized, and the licensed US vehicles were technically not categorized as they were named after the real vehicle rather than being called B133. The problems with this approach become apparent once you try to actually sort the vehicles into these classes. SnowRunner simply has too many weird quirky vehicles that don't really fit, and too many generic US semi-trucks for the classes to be at all balanced. When there are 30 vehicles in the game, it doesn't matter too much. Mudrunner had 4 A-class, 4 B-class, 10 C-class, 3 D-class and 2 E-class, plus the Ks of the US trucks. But when there's over 100 trucks, the proportions multiply out to a really impractical distribution like what we already have. Functionally, it's the same as using words to name the categories, so we're not actually going to solve the problems with this. I think it needs more of an overhaul than this, with categories actually based on something. Another potential categorization I thought of is cargo capacity, but that would be really messy as there are a lot of 2-slot vehicles and a lot of no-slot vehicles. But this idea then gave me another idea. Primary purpose. We're still very much in the realms of the developer's opinions here, but we could have categories like scouting, light cargo, high saddle semi, logging, service. This wouldn't be the most helpful if you use the trucks for anything other than their primary purpose, as they would be categorized with trucks of different actual purposes, and it could confuse people into thinking that they're only supposed to use the trucks for the purpose of their assigned category, when most of the trucks in the game are quite versatile and can be used for a lot of things. It also relies on the developers to make decisions, so naturally most people will disagree with all of them, and based on what has happened with the categories actually in the game, the devs will forget what their own categories are for anyway, so I don't think this is a very good idea. But it would still be better than what we have at the moment. Okay, so we need a way of categorizing the trucks that is not based on opinion, but on inarguable stats. So how about categorization by weight? I was going to say I have no stats on the in-game weights, but then I realised that Vlad Vulcan has again provided, and the spreadsheet has all the numbers. With this spreadsheet I can filter all the trucks by their stock mass including wheels, and this tells me that the majority of the scouts are under 5 tons, assuming it's in kilograms. I don't actually have the units. Just the Lodestar, Burlak, F750, Earth Romans, Tatarin, and for some reason the Cat Telehandler are above that, so let's have the lightest category be under 5 tons. We should also include the very small currently off-road trucks of the Action, Warthog and Tatra 805. Between 5 and 10 we have a lot of the US semi-trucks, those heavier scouts, and the lighter Russian trucks like the Steps. Between 10 and 15 we have the heavier semi-trucks, like the Vorons, Tagers and Anks, and the Azov Sprinter. Very important, I know. This leaves 33 trucks, and I think that's a bit too many for one category. The other categories have had 23, 27 and 20 respectively, so I'll split it up into 15 to 25 and 25 plus. 15 to 25 gives us 18 trucks, including most of the Azovs, the lighter heavy semi-haulers like the Boar, Derry 3194 and Mack Defense, the Tatra 8x8, both the twin steers, and the two modern tractors. To my amusement, the Tataran also ends up here because it's just that chunky. And finally, we have the 15 big boys at over 25 tons. Unsurprisingly, this is things like the Elephant, Big Ken and Big Cat, Azov Antarctic, Colobs, Fem, Plaid, Zig 605R and 612H. Personally, I do like this categorization quite a bit. It's well defined, relatively practical, and it makes a lot of sense to me, while also being simple enough that it's reasonable to ask for. Most trucks are where you would expect them to be, which is more than I can say for SnowRunner's actual system, and they are fairly well distributed. Again, more than I can say for what we have now. This next idea is a bit of a joke, but they could totally sort them by manufacturer. I'm talking like Forza Horizon style menu. Sure, most of the manufacturers are made up, and 2/3 only have 1 or 2 trucks, but I would still be able to find that one truck I want quicker than with the current categories. Before I tell you my best idea, I would just like to ask for your opinions on this topic. If you have an idea for a way of categorizing the trucks, do let me know in the comments below, or join my Discord server and we can have a chat about it. There is a link in the description. But anyway, in my very important and professional opinion with no bias at all, I think we need a more substantial redesign. Instead of having the truck storage menu be just a narrow window down the side of the screen, I think it should be larger. I don't need most of my screen to be taken up with the truck itself. I know what it looks like, but the stats preferably is the actual numerical values and the description down the right side, and give me the rest of the screen to see my trucks in a grid. I would also just throw out the current categories and let the players put the trucks into effectively folders of their own making. Perhaps along the top of the screen there would be renamable categories which you could drag trucks into to add them to it, and then click the category to show only the trucks in that. My initial thought would be to have all instances of a truck be linked, so that dragging, say, the twin steer into category 3 means that all of my many twin steers are now in that category. But I'm actually thinking it might be even better to not link them and allow players to put one configuration of a truck into one category and a different configuration of the same truck into a different category. And why not let us put each truck in multiple categories as well, because some are really versatile, and it's just another thing that might help some people organise their trucks and isn't going to inconvenience anyone who doesn't want to do that. I also desperately want to be able to sort my trucks by different things. Currently it's always sorted by last used, which can be useful, but if I want to find a particular truck, alphabetical is what I would prefer. And while we're at it, let's add weight, durability, fuel consumption, engine torque, wheel diameter, price new, value, source, maybe even colour. Perhaps the categories could then be set up to automatically contain all trucks within user-specified parameters of these attributes. And even better, let's add a search box, so when I know what truck I want, I don't even have to scroll through my trucks in any order to find it. But this system is not perfect. People like me, who know what they're doing, know the names of the trucks, know which trucks are good at what, and normally know which truck I want to find, this system would be so much better than the current categories. But I can absolutely see how a new player would look at this and be lost among the many features I have added. Having more than 5 trucks on screen at a time would, I'm sure, be better for everyone, but the folders and detailed sorting criteria are just not going to be very helpful when you have less than, say, 20 trucks, and it could well be far more confusing. For that reason, I propose we give the players options. Outlandish, I know. Throw a setting in the gameplay options or something to enable advanced truck storage, which defaults off, and when off, organises them by the weight categories I talked about earlier instead. And then I can turn it on and have my fancy automatic categories based on what I want to filter them by, and I can actually find the right truck for what I want in a reasonable time. Also, I just like organising things, and I would enjoy putting them in my little folders. With this system, new players on the simple setting would be able to understand the basic categories easier. I have seen new players struggle to understand what SnowRunner's categories mean, but weight is self-explanatory and logical. But where it would really make the difference is for more experienced players. They could save hours of our lives which we would have spent scrolling through our truck storage. Even just expanding the truck storage list UI would save both new players and pros time. The thing is, to save our focus, I'm not going to watch this video. I hardly have a huge platform. It's not like I've got the ear of any of the larger creators. and Sabre are probably never going to change the SnowRunner truck categories at all, so I guess this is really just another thing to add to the SnowRunner 2 wishlist. But I don't know, maybe if we go and suggest it on the forums and everywhere else and keep pestering about it, we can actually get something done about this.